Hello, welcome to Sasquatch and Cigars. This week on my Definition Cigar Review series is going to be an interesting one. So last week we started off with the Kinsman. I did that one because of the kinship that I feel in the cigar community. Most of the people that I've talked to, actually all the people that I've talked to, are great people, very friendly, very outgoing, always happy to have an answer to a question, help you with a find, and just generally great people. So today, I'm starting this one off with the Definition Cigars, the Walking Stick. The Walking Stick is a 7-inch by 42 Lancero or Vitola cigar. It's a dark cigar. It's an Ecuadorian Maduro wrapper, Nicaraguan binders and fillers, and the tasting notes come with a strong baking spice toasted bread at the beginning, shifting to a deep molasses sweetness towards the midsection and finishing off with a hint of pepper at the end. I chose this one because it's a medium to full-bodied cigar, and our stories tonight are going to start off medium and conclude with full-bodied. The difference in tonight's episode is I've got 3 stories that I'm going to talk about. One of those stories is completely fabricated, made up by yours truly, and I would like y'all's input as to which one you think is the fabricated story without Googling things or anything like that. See if you can pick it out without looking stuff up, because the other 2 stories are documented actual stories. That being said, I'll reveal next Sunday in my video next Sunday which one is the fabricated one. So let's get this started. I'm gonna light my cigar. So I'm gonna put my microphone down. Dropped it on the floor or ground. Ha ha ha. Sometimes I even question my own self. This is my first time having a Lancero. As you can see, I'm going to be pairing it with a drink. I got myself some Ron Zacapa XO. Let me put the mic down again so I can pour it. My ice melted a little bit. It's really hot out. I don't want a watered down drink. So again, this is Ron Zacapa XO rum. I figured a nice darker rum like that would go good with the Maduro wrapper of this cigar. So right off the bat, I'm not really getting spiciness, but I am kind of getting it's a toasted flavor. I'm not sure if I would call it bread. I know my friend Jeff said I said too much, so I'm going to try and not do that. But right now it's just a force of habit I'm trying to break. So the first story that we're going to kick off tonight, it happened Memorial Day weekend of 2026. And there was a group of 10 teenagers who went for a weekend camping trip in the Lost Valley Reservoir in Idaho. They reported that they felt like they were being stalked by Sasquatch, and not just one Sasquatch, but multiple Sasquatches. Sorry, I told you it's a force of habit. One camper claimed that she heard something moving alongside her in the timber and heard whistling, and she really got the feeling that she was trying to be lured further into the woods. Multiple campers reported wood knocks, branches being broken, unexplainable noises around camp. And on Sunday, a teen reported seeing a large bipedal figure. Let's see, it says, I'm reading from notes. Estimated at 9 feet tall, human-like in shape, covered in hair, and moving through the tree line. So I have seen reports of this in the actual news. It was reported to the BFRO, and then the BFRO had their investigators come out, and they did some interviews with some of the teens and stuff. And then news outlets started picking it up, and it's considered a credible witness. Not necessarily witness, but a credible sighting. I apologize, I'm stammering. Because there's so many witnesses to what happened. And they all tell the same story. Their story hasn't really changed, and it seems that they're in the same, they're all telling the same thing. It's not like they have differences in their stories or something like that. I'm at a loss for words right now. I guess it's because I'm really concerned about saying too much. Thanks a lot, Jeff. And so now it's just kind of making it a little harder for me to make these videos. So the next story that I've got happened in 2025 in April. Two friends decided that they were going to go on a fishing trip for the weekend to the Caddo Lake area. The guys' names are Tim, Buck Wilson, and Mike Smith. They are both avid fishermen. They're outdoorsmen. They like camping. They like fishing. They like hunting. And they decided that they hadn't been to the Caddo Lake area, but they've heard that the fishing was really good there. So they decided to go up there, and they chose a remote campsite well away from everybody else just because they wanted to have a decent private area to fish and talk and have fun. So they left on Friday, and they got out there about 2:30 in the afternoon and started to set up camp. And then it took them about an hour to set up camp. They decided to relax for a little bit. And then about 4:30, they decided they would put out some catfish lines. So they walked along the edge of the water and set out about 10 catfish lines, tying them off to trees and branches and stuff. And they baited their hooks up, sent them out, and got everything all set up. Went back to camp, grabbed their fishing poles, and decided they were going to go do some fishing with rod and reel. My ash dropped in my lap. Cheers. That's a really good rum. If you've never had Zacapa XO, try it. It's expensive, but it's good. So they spent the next couple of hours fishing with rod and reel with not too much luck, nothing worth keeping, and they decided that it was time to just go back to camp and have dinner and relax for the night. That's what they did, and that first night happened without incident. Nothing happened. They wake up the next morning, they eat breakfast, and they decide, oh, let's go check our catfish lines. And they start down the line. First, like 3 or 4, they got a couple of fish. Then the next couple, they got a couple more fish. And they got to the last 2 lines, and they found the lines were pulled out of the water and draped over tree branches. Bait still on them. And they looked at each other, thought that that was weird. They looked around, didn't see anything, didn't notice any tracks or anything like that near where their lines were, and they just shrugged it off and threw the lines back in the water and had already baited their previous lines and got those back in the water. The draw on the length of this is a little bit harder than what I'm used to, but it's not a bad smoke. I really like it. I don't know if you can see just how dark the wrapper is and stuff, but this Maduro is a really good one. Again, that's the size of it, so it's not a really thick cigar. The rest of Saturday was spent fishing, talking, just generally having fun and relaxing. That night, about 8 o'clock, they had rechecked, well, I'd say more like about 5:30 or so, they rechecked their catfish lines. Nothing out of the ordinary. I think they only got like 2 more catfish out of that batch. They put them back in the water and proceeded back to camp. And they sat down, ate dinner, and was just chit-chatting about the day and what they were going to do on Sunday, how long it was that they were going to be there, if they were going to, what time they were going to break camp. And about 10 o'clock, Buck decided, I'm going to break out my cigars. So he broke out a cigar case, offered one to Mike. He accepted, made a joke about how his wife really doesn't like him smoking cigars because they stink. But he had a day to get the smell off of them, so he wasn't worried about it. And they both men had a chuckle. They lit up their cigars, kicking back to relax. And after about 20 or 30 minutes of just sitting there smoking their cigars, Mike asked Buck, "Do you hear that?" Buck's like, "Hear what?" And Mike was like, "That's just it. It's silent. It's like there's no birds, there's no frogs, there's no insects. There's just nothing." And as Buck sat there, he finally came to the realization that it was absolutely silent. Even the wind had died down, and it was eerie, just an eerie silence, deafening silence, if you can say that. It might be an oxymoron, but anyways. So they're sitting there, and off to the right, they hear 3 really loud wood knocks ring out. The knocks were not super close, but they were close enough that they sounded pretty loud. And both men just kind of, what was that? And Mike was like, I don't know. He goes, I'm not sure. Never heard that before. And then almost instantly, off to the left of camp was a whistle. And not just like a bird whistle or anything like that. They described it as kind of human in nature, like kind of like a, and but it was faint. It wasn't like it was close. They maybe estimated about maybe 200 yards, 300 yards away, and then nothing, dead silence for the next about 10 or 15 minutes. And then off to the right again, they heard branches being broken. This caused the men to start, and they both looked over. Buck grabbed his flashlight, shined it into the tree line, but it was a smaller light, and so the light didn't cast maybe but about 250 feet into the wood line, and they couldn't see anything. Then after the branches were broke, there was silence again. And then all of a sudden behind them on the left again was a loud whoop off in the woods, but this time it was close. They estimated about maybe 100 yards away. They turned their lights to back the other way, and they couldn't see anything. And about this time, Mike was like, you know what? Screw this. And he went over to the truck, and he got out his big light, and he brought it over, and he turned it on and shined it off into the woods. Now, this light was 20,000 lumens, and it lit up the tree line like nothing, and nobody's business. It was very bright, and it went further in. They still didn't see anything, and then behind them, they heard some more branches being broken, and this time when they turned around and shined that brighter light, that's when they saw it. Bright red eye shine behind one of the bigger trees in the back. This face and hair-covered face, eyes looking at him, shoulder hanging past the tree, arm around the tree like this. And as soon as the light, and it realized it was in the light, it ducked behind the tree. And they knew that it was still behind the tree, and they were peering. And then all of a sudden behind them, like right outside of camp, came a really loud wood knock, and they spun around and shined the bright light over there. Didn't see anything. And then all of a sudden they heard splashing and stomping moving away from them behind them, and they turned around in enough time to see a dark figure running through the water's edge and then disappearing into the woods. Both of the men looked at each other and said, screw that, we're out of here. They jumped in the truck and they drove to the nearest town, which I have it written down here. Let's see. Yeah, I can't remember the name of the town, but they got a hotel room for the evening, and then they went out and decided that they were going to just stay in the hotel room for the night, and they'd go back in the morning to get their stuff. And then, just a minute, my wife is interrupting me.
Where's my car?
It's over in the driveway. You're killing me, Smalls. Where are you going?
I don't want to do it.
No. Sorry for the interruption. Anyways, so they wake up the next morning on Sunday. They go back to their camp, and the camp is just ransacked. Their tent is torn apart. Their fishing gear is broken, what they left out there. They did find large footprints, bare footprints, not bare like a barefoot person, but much larger, all around the camp. And to this day, they just packed up what little stuff they could salvage, threw the rest of the stuff in the back of the truck, and then got the hell out of there. To this day, they refuse to go to the Cottle Lake area, and they didn't report it because they were afraid to be seen as crazy. But then the word got out that something had happened, and then they decided to just go ahead and talk about it. So I heard about this through rumor and word of mouth. I don't think this one has been reported anywhere, but so anyway, so that's story number 2. That happened here in Texas in 2025. And then my last story. So if the Idaho and Texas stories sound like footprints just outside the campfire light, the next story is what happens when those footprints are follow people for generations and get too close. Imagine a fishing village on a remote coast in Alaska. This village has had hunters disappear, vanish without a trace. Bodies turn up mutilated. Gigantic footprints found in the wilderness around town. Residents started carrying rifles everywhere they went. And in the late 1940s to 1950s, the town was just abandoned. I went out. That's the problem with running your mouth sometimes. I'm going to try something because the draw is a little bit hard. I don't think I cut it enough. I'm going to trim it up a little bit more. See if I can get a better draw off of it. Yeah, that's much better. So the town that I'm talking about is Portlock, Alaska. Portlock, Alaska was founded in the early 20s, I believe, and it was mostly done by Alaska natives and Russian Altuit people, and it was formed as a fishing village and salmon cannery, as that was one of the primary ways of making money back then, was fishing for salmon. Not long after the U.S. Post Office, a U.S. Post Office opened up there, legitimizing the town as an actual town in America. And shortly after that, according to residents and tribal elders, strange things started happening. So the strange things that would happen were hunters would go off to go hunt sheep and they would never return. People would disappear on the outskirts of town and they wouldn't return. But eventually residents would come across the bodies of these hunters and the people that disappeared mutilated. And they know what bear attacks look like, and they said that this couldn't have been bear attacks because there were no claw marks or bite marks. It was mostly blunt force trauma and stuff like that. So I looked up Portlock, and it really is a town. And there's no official police reports on what happened. I couldn't find any. I did find some news articles that talked about it. I believe it was the Discovery Channel or the History Channel or one of those channels did a documentary called The Alaskan Killer Bigfoot. But if you talk to the residents and the tribal elders, they say that they were plagued by a creature known as, I believe it's Nantiak. I can't remember if I'm pronouncing that right or not. Let me look at my notes. And yeah, it's Nantinak. Nantinak. It's also known as Alaska's Killer Bigfoot. The difference between Nantinak and Sasquatch, his lower states cousin, is that Nantinak tends to be way more territorial and way more aggressive towards humans. And that befits what happened in Port Locke, where over a series of years, these attacks were happening and people were getting killed. And eventually in the 40s, late 40s, early 50s, the town just, they abandoned the town. They felt like they couldn't live there anymore. Now, officially, if you look it up, the town was abandoned for economic reasons. The salmon canning industry kind of dried up, and the people left to go to other villages close by. And that part's true. They did go to closer villages and also into further away villages. They just kind of disbanded and totally abandoned the town. There is still remnants of the town, part of the canneries there. I've seen videos of it. The structures are still there, some of them, but they're all dilapidated. The forest has reclaimed much of the town, and there's just nothing there. Why did these people abandon the town? What scared them so bad that they had to get out of there? Or was it just what the official report says, economic decline? That we don't know. Like I said, there's several, I believe there's several documentaries out on this. I think the Y-Files covered this Alaskan Killer Bigfoot. Like I said, there's a documentary called Alaska's Killer Bigfoot, and it talks about Port Locke and all the surrounding areas. I believe Small Town Monsters covered it, and now I'm just throwing it out there in my videos because, like I said, I'm smoking the walking stick, which this cigar, other than me getting distracted and not keeping a drag on it, it went out on me, so I had to relight it. That was my fault, not the cigar's fault. This right now, I'm just starting the middle of the cigar, and I'm getting a sweetness from it. I guess there is a little bit of a bread flavor on the back of my tongue, but there is definitely a sweetness. Definitely a peppery flavor on the retrohale, but I can definitely get molasses out of it. I would definitely peg that as molasses on the sweetness. The reason why I picked the walking stick is just because simply the name and the profile of the stick is starting off as medium to heavy bodied or strong bodied or medium to full bodied, and then kind of creamy, easiness, sweetness in the middle, and then ending on a more full, peppery flavor. And I believe that my stories tonight kind of reflect that profile. We started off kind of light with just a light sighting in Idaho, moved into the Caddo Lake sighting in 2025 in Texas, and then back in time, walking back in time to the 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s of Alaska, and talking about Port Locke, Alaska, and what happened there. I hope this video has been entertaining. Like I said, one of these stories is completely fabricated and totally untrue. Next week, when I do my next Definition Cigars review, I'll do the reveal as to which one. Hi, cat. This is my cat, Charlie. Hey, get out of here. I'm trying to do a video. I apologize for the interruption again. But I'll do the reveal as to which story was fabricated and made up and which two are true. If you Google it, you'll find out which one it is really quickly. So be honest and guess on your own without looking it up. I'm going to say the taste of this cigar goes really well with that dark rum. Zacapa 23 or XO is probably one of my favorite rums. It's completely smooth. There's no harsh afterbite. It goes down really smooth. And yeah, that's dangerously smooth. Anyways, but it pairs really well with the Maduro of the wrapper of the cigar. It's just, they're outstanding together. And just sitting out here in the evening is relaxing. I really like it. I enjoy it. I enjoy telling these stories, and I enjoy talking about Sasquatch. Again, let me know if you think it's true or untrue, which story you think was fabricated, which two stories you think are actually true. And I'm not going to finish the cigar on the video, but I may take and do a short afterwards tonight to tell you how the cigar rounded out. I don't want this video to be too long. So with that, I'm going to say good night and God bless.